to do an album of Bob Dylan songs, and I just didn't like the way that the Hollies wanted to do some of his stuff. Appalled me.
And I can't really explain the whole situation because many things were happening at the same time, which didn't make sense.
On the surface, the Hollies were polished perfection with pop singles that slid right into radio rotations. But behind that shine, tension, ambition, and clashes that nearly tore them apart. From Graham Nash pushing protest songs and psychedelic visions while his bandmates clung to safe, radio-friendly hooks, to Alan Clark walking away, tired of being boxed in by the same formula that had made him a star, to the irony of their biggest American hit, Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, sounding nothing like the Hollies at all. This is the story of a band that mastered success but struggled with identity. They scored timeless hits, but lost one of their boldest voices in the process. For new artists, it's proof of a hard truth. Staying on top doesn't matter if you can't agree on who you are.
No cigarettes, no sleep.
The Hollies were basically crumbling from the inside, and the loudest cracks came from Graham Nash. Clark and Hicks were cool, keeping things glossy and radio-friendly. But Nash wanted out of that bubble. He was chasing something heavier, more trippy, more meaningful. Stuff closer to protest songs and cosmic folk than sugary pop hooks. Things really blew up when he brought in King Midas in reverse. He thought it was one of his strongest ideas. Layered, dreamy, different. The others saw it flop on the charts and decided it was proof he was too far gone. Their producer brushed it off as being way too complicated for the public. That cut deep. Then Nash rolled out Marrakesh Express, fresh from a trip through Morocco. The group shot it down immediately, saying it wasn't commercial enough. To Nash, that was the final insult. The same track would go on to launch Crosby, Stills and Nash, which only rubbed salt in the wound. But honestly, this wasn't some sudden fallout. It was years of tension bubbling over. Clark and Nash had been side by side since childhood, belting Everly Brothers tunes in school before building the Hollies with Hicks. By the time they settled on their name, half Buddy Holly nod, half seasonal pun, they already had the formula that would take them to the top. But once Nash started thinking bigger than that formula, the bond that built the band just couldn't hold anymore. The Hollies cracked the code early. Tracks like Just One Look and Here I Go Again locked them into the charts, and under their little alias, they even wrote their first big one, We're Through. Their sound was polished, sweet, and safe. The kind of thing that played like the clean-cut alternative to the scruffy chaos of the Stones. Then Bus Stop crossed the Atlantic, and suddenly they were standing next to the biggest names coming out of Britain. But the success box got smaller the bigger they got. The label and producer kept them in the pop singles machine lane, churning out catchy, radio-friendly hooks. Nash was suffocating. He wanted bigger projects, music that reflected what was happening in the world. The rest of the crew weren't buying it. Eventually, he snapped. He bailed on the endless touring grind, moved to LA, and teamed up with David Crosby and Stephen Stills. Within no time, Crosby, Stills, and Nash blew up, and Marrakesh Express, the very track the Hollies rejected, opened their debut and became the song everyone remembered.
I left the Hollies for a couple of reasons. Didn't feel that they trusted my need for direction.
For the Hollies, it was a crossroads. They kept going, scoring massive singles like He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, and Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress. But their reputation stayed messy. One of the most successful bands of the era, yet also proof of what happens when you play it safe and let your boldest voice slip away. When Nash walked away, the Hollies could have easily crumbled. He wasn't just another harmony singer. He was the one always stirring things up, pushing for bolder songs that didn't always fit the pop formula. Losing that kind of spark could have left them stranded. Instead, they moved fast, pulling in Terry Sylvester from other local groups. He slipped into the lineup with ease, matching the vocals and bringing his own writing to the table.
I'd been in two groups in England, one called the Escorts, which is a local Liverpool group, and those are the Swinging Blue Jeans.
Right.
But never really had hits with them. They'd sort of passed it, you know.
The switch worked, at least on the surface. Their first single with him flew up the charts, and he blended right into Clark and Hicks's creative circle. But even as the hits kept coming, people could tell the magic wasn't exactly the same. Sylvester was polished, dependable, consistent, but he didn't have Nash's unpredictability. Still, the Hollies proved they weren't finished. They dropped soaring ballads that hit hard emotionally and reminded everyone they could still dominate radio. Songs like He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother, and The Air That I Breathe became undeniable anthems, big enough to outlive their moment and echo across decades. But the success came with baggage. Critics started writing them off as too safe, too shiny, stuck in an older mold while the rock world got darker and edgier. They were still selling records, but the tastemakers weren't impressed. It showed the awkward truth of that era. Being marketable could keep a band at the top of the charts, but it didn't guarantee respect or a lasting reputation.
Then they wanted to do an album of Bob Dylan songs, and I just didn't like the way that the Hollies wanted to do some of his stuff appalled me.
After Nash dipped, the drama inside the Hollies didn't exactly cool off. Alan Clark, the face and voice everyone associated with the group, started feeling boxed in by the same walls that had frustrated Nash. Eventually, he pieced out, chasing a solo career that promised more freedom. While he was gone, they brought in Swedish singer Mikkel Rickfors to carry the mic. The guy had a solid voice, but his heavier accent and different tone didn't click with English-speaking audiences the way Clark's instantly recognizable delivery did. The album they cut together did all right in parts of Europe, but elsewhere it barely moved the needle. Clark came back a couple of years later, but the revolving door had already chipped away at the band's stability. His second walkout later on only underlined the issue. The Hollies kept getting caught between personal ambition and staying united. And yet, in the middle of all this mess, they scored the biggest American hit of their career. While Clark was technically out, the group dropped Long Cool Woman in a Black Dress, a raw, stripped-down rocker that ditched their usual harmonies and leaned into a sound that felt closer to Creedence Clearwater Revival than the Hollies' polished pop. Ironically, the song's success depended on Clark's rougher vocal and guitar work, and it exploded, selling millions worldwide and climbing to number 2 in the US charts. It was proof that even in chaos, they could still stumble into career-defining moments. That big hit only made things messier. To fans who'd grown up on Bus Stop and Carrie Ann, Long Cool Woman barely sounded like the Hollies at all. It came off more like John Fogerty moonlighting in another band. The bluesy grit and stripped-down storytelling clashed with the shiny, harmony-driven image they'd been building since day one. Inside the group, it stirred up doubt about who they even were anymore. Outside, the wind felt hollow. They'd finally broken America in a huge way, but with no proper US tour and sloppy promotion from their label, the momentum fizzled. Instead of unlocking a new era, the single became a freak success they couldn't repeat. By the time punk and new wave kicked the door open, the Hollies were starting to look like museum pieces. Their smooth choruses and neat production felt out of step next to the raw shock of the Pistols or the quirk of Talking Heads. When they tried to chase the new trends, critics tore them apart for sounding unsure of themselves, and younger audiences weren't buying in. The years after Nash left were basically a tug-of-war between survival and identity. They proved they could weather departures, still land timeless tracks, and even flirt with reinvention. But the cracks never fully sealed. They were caught in between, too polished to get full rock cred, too restless to settle into pop, and too fractured to lock down a long-term lane. The takeaway for any new artist? Success doesn't erase chaos, and once a group loses its sense of self, winning it back is harder than scoring another hit.
And I can't really explain the whole situation because many things were happening at the same time, which didn't make sense.
So, from the jump, the Hollies really revolved around two people, Alan Clark and Tony Hicks. Clark's voice was the thing everyone remembered. It cut through every record and basically became the band's signature. Hicks, on the other hand, was the quiet architect. His jangly guitar lines, tight harmonies, and co-writing helped shape just as much of the sound, even if he didn't always get the spotlight. Together, they were the glue that held the group steady through lineup changes and music industry storms. But steady didn't mean smooth. Clark, as the face up front, naturally soaked up most of the attention. Hicks, even though he was writing and playing on their biggest songs like Bus Stop and On a Carousel, often sat in the background. It wasn't exactly a public feud, but anyone could see how lopsided the shine was. That kind of imbalance has broken plenty of other bands, and it simmered here too. Losing Graham Nash made things even trickier. He wasn't just a harmony singer, he was part of the Clark-Hicks-Nash songwriting trio that fueled their run of hits. Once he left, the money and credit had to be redistributed, and that always sparks tension. Over time, the usual legacy band issues popped up: disputes over royalties, questions about who controlled the name, and the never-ending fight over who deserved what slice of the pie. Still, Clark and Hicks somehow kept the whole thing afloat. Their partnership was never easy. It was spotlight versus shadow, ego versus teamwork. But without both of them pulling in their own way, the Hollies wouldn't have survived long enough to leave behind a catalog that carved out its own space in British pop history.